I'm sitting here in my room, absolutely terrified to look at my phone. I'm paranoid to the point where I'm afraid to even be online, for the fear of getting an email or a Skype call or an instant message. I shut my Wi-Fi off as soon as I got home, but I know I'll have to turn it back on to post this. I genuinely don't know what to do anymore or how to stop this, and I'm praying that someone out there sees this and can help me understand what's happening. My heart is broken, my anxiety is level 100, and my world is absolutely spiraling. Please, anyone, how do I stop this? I apologize in advance at how long this story is inevitably going to be, but I need to tell someone, anyone, everything. I'm a 25-year-old female, an only child, and raised in an immigrant family that fled from Croatia when I was 3 years old. I consider myself fully Americanized at this point, having been raised by society and the culture, traditions and superstitions for as long as I can remember. My parents, however, not so much. Growing up, my dad was always strict and overly fearful of strangers in this strange land. I wasn't allowed to ride the school bus until I begged and begged the summer before 6th grade. And when he followed, not so subtly behind the said bus for over 3 weeks, before finally succumbing to my preteen independence. I wasn't allowed to go on dates in high school unless Dad had all but the boys' social security numbers for collateral. I was expected to be home every night before 10 p.m., or I'd be stripped of all precious independences for at least a week, and my upgraded monthly text allowance was almost exclusively reserved for texting my father when I had arrived, left and changed my location while out with my friends. Needless to say, my dad, who I love more than any other man in this world, don't get me wrong, was hard to handle. My mom was a bit more laid back, thankfully, and never really kept heavy tabs on my life. She was the radiant light in the family, always so positive and kind. Mom never said no to a custom or a tradition, or a particularly short skirt before giving me a chance to explain it. She was even open to celebrating Thanksgiving after some time, despite not really understanding why Americans allocated an entire day of the year to strictly eating as much as possible. She just went with it. The only thing Mom had a hard time grasping was superstitions. Croatia had its own superstitions, which she literally lived by, but little things in American culture just didn't seem to click. One of these difficult concepts was unveiled when I hit high school, and I decided that I was interested in theater. It wasn't anything that I was super passionate about, but a boy I liked was in the first semester winter plan, so naturally, I joined. Our personalities didn't align though, so we just ended up becoming friends. But I stayed in theater because it was a fun outlet and I was the whimsical type. In my first ever play, I was cast as an extra with a whopping 1-sentence dialogue, and Mom and Dad were thrilled. I still remember Dad's cheesy grin the day I told him about my tiny little role, and then him walking into the back the night of the show, where we were all last-minute rehearsing, in a full suit and tie to just squeeze the life out of his daughter before her mini moment of fame. I remember my mom following close behind him and grabbing my hands, and then lovingly wishing me good luck in her adorable broken English. A friend of mine behind me mock gasped at the words, confusing her, and I explained that in show business, you don't say good luck, because it's actually considered bad luck then. Mom's laugh was awkward and uncertain, until after I told her break a leg was a more accepted option. She whispered a prompt, "No, no, no," to me, which made my friend laugh, gave me a tight hug and a kiss on the cheek and walked off with my dad. She gave me a double thumbs up just as they were walking out of the door, and I remember rolling my eyes at just how awkward my mom was. That was the only play of mine my mom ever saw. A few months after, she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer and was often hospitalized. I contemplated quitting theater, but Mom convinced me that she'd never forgive me If she didn't allow my father to film me on stage so she can cheer me from her boring hospital room. So I did. I stayed. Our summer play at the end of my freshman year was bittersweet, because I landed a pretty big supporting cast role with several lines of dialogue, which was so exciting for me. But Mom was in the hospital again. So that night, Dad did the usual breaking and entering into the back room to wish me luck before the show, and I watched him exit alone without his little mama shadow. It was 10 minutes to showtime and I was adjusting my dress when I saw my cell phone light up on the table and my mom's grinning face filled the screen. I answered it as quickly as I had noticed it, but I only heard a crackle on the other end. After calling out to her for a few times, I sat and I waited patiently for a response. I knew that the service in the hospital was dreadful, and chances were high that she was making the nurses move around the floor to get better reception. Finally, in the midst of the quiet static, I heard one faintly whispered word. Sretno. And then it cut out. I looked at my phone and I tried calling her back when I realized that we had lost connection, but the line couldn't be reached. At first, anxiety hit me like a bullet train and I couldn't even comprehend what she had actually said. But then when I realized what I had heard, I smiled, and then I laughed. Sretno means good luck in our language. Mom knew that she wasn't supposed to say good luck, but I could see that she took it literally and opted to say it in Croatian rather than saying those damned unlucky English words. It lifted me up and gave me a newfound sense of determination to kill it on stage. But I wasn't the only one doing the killing. I will never forget that night. The first night. Everything was going exactly as planned until about a third of the way into the play, when one of those old school 20-pound stage lights came detached off its perch and plummeted to the ground, where Maria, the lead, stood performing. The force of it crashing into her tilted head, right in front of me, killed her instantly and rendered me hysterical. My father pushed through the crowd, jumped the stage, and pulled my sobbing 15-year-old self out of the school theater and into the rain, effectively banishing me from ever being under those lights again. We didn't even grab my things from the back. My phone, my clothes, my book bag. Everything was left at the school as my dad sped away, mumbling to either myself or himself of how stupid he was to trust an American school to be structurally safe, and how he never should have let me join theater, and how it could have been me, all the while squeezing my left hand in a shaky vice grip on my lap. I remember being hyper aware of the cars on the road, of my dad's muttering, of the rain hitting the windshield. I remember pulling into the hospital and hearing my dad finally let out a sob as he hugged me from the driver's seat. I remember really wanting to see my mom. I remember walking into the hospital and my dad talking to a nurse who looked sad to see me. I remember my dad breaking down and two of the nurses grabbing him as he collapsed. I remembered my entire life changing that night when I lost my mom. I didn't tell my dad, my friends, or any other family members about my mother's last word to me during our last call. Mostly because it was the last thing I could remember that was strictly ours. I was selfish and sad and kept that moment, that word, chained and locked away inside of a reinforced steel box, tucked into the depths of my broken heart. It was hard for a while, but as it tends to do, time made things easier. Dad and I were closer during the start of my junior year than we were the entire sophomore year combined. Things were finally returning to normal. Sort of. My first semester finals in my junior year were scheduled the week before Christmas, and I spent the week prior to that in the county library basically from the time I got off school to about 8 or 9 at night. My dad had his reservations when it came to me being out alone, but we compromised. I would drive home after school. Dad would be home from work and he would drive me to the library. And then he would pick me up and we would get dinner to go. We bonded, I ended up saving gas, and Dad kept loving tabs on the only family he had left in the United States. And then the second night came. The Friday of the week that I spent studying in the library, I called my dad to tell him I needed a little longer to finish my English final prep because it was proving to be the most stressful final that I had lined up, and to pick me up at 9:30. Dad agreed and I hung up. I barely put pencil to paper before my phone screen lit up and the sound of plastic vibrating against wood echoed in the small room that I had reserved. The number was unknown, but I thought maybe it had been a friend's unlisted number calling about finals, so I answered. At first, it was silence on the other end. Hello? I called again. Just as I was about to move the phone away from my ear, I heard a light crackle. Is someone there? Sretno. The voice was faint and distant, not overly feminine or masculine, but definitely there. And my heart stopped. I swear I saw spots and felt my lungs decompress. Mama? I heard my voice before I realized that I had spoken, and all at once, loss and memories overwhelmed me. I don't remember if I intentionally threw down my phone or if my muscles went limp, but I dropped the phone to the table, pushed myself back from the edge, and flattened my body against the wall of that small room quicker than I had moved in years. I could hear my blood rush into my ears, and every breath sounded strange and heavy as if it bounced off the walls around me. There was no way, but no one else would ever have a reason to say that to me. No one else had known. I felt the walls closing in on me as I recalled the voice and desperately tried to replay it in my mind, to figure out if I recognized it as her voice. And then I was dumping everything into my bag, including my phone, and sprinting out of the room, down the stairs and towards the front door. My dad wouldn't be there for another hour, but I was fine with running home. As I stepped into the lobby of the library off the first floor staircase, I noticed an older woman standing in front of an elevator a few yards away from me, and I heard the ding as it approached. To this day, I'm not sure why I stopped running to watch her board the elevator, but more than anything, I wish that I hadn't. The metal door slowly slid open, and I watched as the woman took 3 steps forward. In the split second that it took for one of her feet to firmly plant themselves onto the platform, the elevator dropped. I watched, horrified, as her body was contorted and crushed by the weight of the compartment falling to the lower level. One leg and a half hip snapped off and flattened, and a gnarled right leg bent unnaturally against a violently convulsing upper torso. Blood pooled under her hands. Stark white knuckles pressed into the carpet, as though they could push what was left of her body up off the ground. And her face. God, her face. She looked directly through me, and it felt like she was staring into my soul with that broken, pain expression. It took me all of 2 whole seconds to rebound from the shock and recognize the woman in front of me as my English teacher. That night was the first time that I had ever passed out. I remember waking up on a stretcher outside of the library, and my dad sitting in the ambulance next to me and watching me with his tired eyes. I also remember immediately turning over and vomiting straight bile onto the ambulance floor. I could not explain what happened or how, but I regret today not telling anybody about it back then. About not telling my dad when he asked if I was okay. About not telling the police officer when he asked me for my testimony. About not telling the school-appointed psychiatrist on the Monday of finals week after our English final was effectively cancelled. Once again, time haphazardly healed the wounds that I had accumulated, and though I could never possibly forget the call and that very specific word uttered through the static, I pushed it to the back of my mind. I went to college. I met a boy. We dated seriously for 2 years until we decided to move out of the dorms and in together right before my junior year of college. My dad had no idea that we'd be living together, obviously, but he had met him, and despite him being an American boy, he decided that he liked him. Ben, we'll call him, did his research on the old country to prepare for that first meeting, and my dad was instantly impressed. I was happy. Ben, who was 2 years older than me, was starting his first year of his master's program. I was so proud of him. Not only was he kind, funny, and cute, but he was smart and ambitious. Dad approved too, which made me love him even more. In October of my junior year, Ben was offered a spring internship that would require him to put off his degree for 6 months and move across the country. Despite how distraught I felt on the inside at having him move away from me for so long, I was excited for him. He had even booked a flight to meet the firm's director the following weekend, so I knew that this was something important to him. That Sunday night when he got home from his trip, I was looking forward to hearing all about the company and the position over dinner. He was so animated when he spoke. I could tell he loved everything about it. But I also noticed that he was averting my eyes and almost overly fidgety. It raised an internal red flag deep within my subconscious, but I ignored those little warning pangs in my chest. We wrapped up dinner and I suggested that he take a warm shower while I cleaned up, and he agreed, still not really meeting my eyes. It made me uncomfortable, but I shrugged it off yet again. I heard the water running in the bathroom and resigned myself to just being glad that he was home. I was being ridiculous, I thought. After putting away the dishes, I lifted his phone off the table to wipe away the crumbs when I saw it flash with an incoming message. I've never been the type to peruse through a boyfriend's phone, so I wouldn't have even thought about looking at it not have been literally in my hand. But when I reflexively looked at his screen, I saw a text from somebody, we'll call Jenna, that read, "Miss you already." A bile rose up in my throat and I set the offending phone back on the tabletop. At that moment, Ben walked out of the bedroom and saw me staring wide-eyed at his phone. He called my name, but I could only look down, my thoughts racing. Everything after that was mostly a blur. I remember asking who Jenna was and why she had missed him, and him stuttering and avoiding my eyes. Ben was never a good liar. I was heartbroken. He finally admitted to a brief affair and I couldn't control myself. I screamed, I shouted. I told him to pack his things and get out. I'll never forget the miserable look on his face as he pleaded for me to reconsider and forgive him. That Jenna was a one-time mistake that only served to reaffirm the great love that he had for me. I was disgusted with him. In the middle of the argument, I heard my phone ring. I let it ring through. I didn't have time for anything else right now. It rang again and I let it ring through. On the third incoming call, I frustratedly grabbed my cell, answered it, and I screamed, "What?" at whoever the impatient asshole was on the other end, but all I got was a soft crackle. That familiar static was all it took to wipe away the anger and ground me. I was suddenly back in the present and had completely forgotten about Ben. My lips came together and twitched reflexively as if to speak. One word was at the top of my tongue, but I was too terrified to say it, to call out to her, if it even was her.
"Sretno."
I screamed and I hung up the phone, staring at it with what I screamed and I hung up the phone, staring at it with a wild expression. Ben rushed over to me, bypassing the island and tripping on our kitchen mat along the way. It was almost like slow motion, watching him fall. His arm grabbed for stability but landed on the knife block, knocking it over and pulling several of the knives down with him. It was fluid and it made sense, the way that he fell. If you asked me to recreate the scene and show you how the knives spun to position themselves beneath him just before he landed, I wouldn't have been able to. The probability of what happened to him was, at best, a quintillion to 1. The police came, I broke my lease, and I moved in with my dad for the rest of the semester. My professors understood and allowed me to finish my classes online. I was pretty numb after that. I refused to talk about Ben or what had happened to anyone. But it wasn't because of Ben. It wasn't because I was traumatized after what had happened to my boyfriend, whether he was a good one or not. But it was because of the call. I didn't even want to think about it because it terrified me senseless anytime I did. They always say that the third time's the charm. So maybe that's why it finally clicked after Ben that something was very, very wrong. I was more aware of the people in my life, the phone calls that I received, and pieces that had been coming together over the years. It was quiet again for a while after that. I got an internship myself after college and they hired me on full time after about 2 years. It was in my hometown and really close to my dad's house. So I rented out a comfortable little apartment down the street from him and I devoted my time to my career. I was doing really well too. For a while. Last year was when it changed. Last year is when it all came together in the worst way. I was notified that I was in line for a promotion almost a year ago today. I was simultaneously thrilled at the prospect of growing within the company, and shocked at the fact that they were asking me to move up 2 whole ranks within the company hierarchy so quickly. I had worked hard, pulled long hours and did anything anyone needed me to do without many distractions in or outside of work, but it still came as such a surprise. I immediately called my dad to tell him the good news, and he was just as proud as he was the day I came home to tell him I was cast in the school play as an extra. Small or large milestone, my dad saw them all the same and he simply oozed pride, even through the phone. I had my internal interview set up for the following Tuesday and I spent hours preparing myself. I worked at a design firm, so it was pertinent that I had a pristine portfolio to show during the interview. But of course, my nerves got the best of me in the face of questions I couldn't have prepared for. My interview was held by a panel of 3. My director, his boss, and the woman who formerly held the role I was interviewing for. My director and I were somewhat close. His daughter was my age and we got along well enough whenever she came to the company gatherings. Dave gave me life advice that my overly traditional father couldn't exactly help with, and I brought him extra fruit to lay every time I baked them for my dad, which was often as it was his favorite dessert. His boss was a very mild man, usually very pleasant to interact with and saw the best in everyone. He valued Dave's opinion heavily, so I thought for sure that I had it in the bag. But I forgot about Karen, the person that I'd be replacing. She was leaving the company by her own volition, but seemed to be bitter at the thought of somebody replacing her so quickly, especially a much younger woman such as myself. She asked all kinds of questions that I wasn't expecting in an effort to impress. I may have bullshitted a couple of answers so obviously that even Dan looked like he was sweating. At the end, I apologized for my limited knowledge and I expressed my desire to improve, and I left, wishing for a half bottle of wine and a pillow to suffocate myself with. I sat down at my desk and I heaved a disappointed sigh. That definitely didn't go as planned. My cell phone buzzed in my purse and I entirely pulled it out thinking it must have been my dad. He was always very punctual and it was exactly 1 hour after the interview. My smile melted instantly as I saw unknown flash across the screen. It wasn't Dad. All I could think to do was sit it down on my desk and stare. If I wasn't sweating before, I was probably drenched right now. My heart was beating so fast, it might as well have been vibrating itself. I wasn't going to answer, not this time. I had my suspicions and I was not going to confirm or deny them. And I didn't. But Anthony did. Anthony sat at the desk closest to mine in our open concept office. He and I got along exceptionally well, and I've third-wheeled with him and his boyfriend multiple times and he was my best friend at work. And truthfully, Probably the closest thing to a best friend outside of work too. I was so lost in my own head that I didn't notice his arm reach over to my shoulder and grab the phone, until he had already answered it. "Anthony!" I screeched. Anthony put a finger up to his lips and winked at me, as though he was doing me a favor. "Hello," he said again, a rough edge to his usually friendly voice. "Who is this? Why are you calling my girlfriend?" I ripped the phone from his hands and I placed it against my ear. "Stop calling me!" Just as I was about to hang up, I heard it. Not her. It. I refused to ever think of this thing on the other end as anything remotely close to what she used to be. "Sredno." I hung up and I threw the phone into my purse. Anthony placed a hand on my shoulder, but I shrugged him off and I ran to the bathroom. I almost didn't make it before my lunch came back up. That day, the police arrived to take a man I didn't know to prison. He turned out to be the other employee in line for the same promotion. He had a momentary lapse of judgment, clarity, sanity, and he had attacked her. They didn't tell me the details of how he did it, but just that Karen didn't survive the attack. Dave and his boss, thankfully, made it out unscathed, but I took another heavy mental beating. I found out the next week that I got the promotion. I respectfully declined. Dave kept trying to get me to reconsider, and made sure I knew that it wasn't because I was the last resort, but that I would have gotten it regardless of how the other guy did because I was exceptional at what I do. That the interview was just a formality. But I said no over and over again, so he had no choice but to give it to someone else. That evening, I had a bottle of Sauv Blanc to myself to mourn the loss of a promotion I wanted more than I could have explained. I didn't invite Anthony or call my dad. I just sat in silence, in shameful regret, and drank myself into a stupor. I blacked out somewhere towards the bottom of that bottle and I woke up to 6 missed calls from Anthony. For a second, I thought it was a work day and that I was late, but I quickly realized that it was a Saturday. Swallowing thickly, I called him back, making a mental note to drink less wine and more water. Anthony answered with a shaky voice. "Sorry I missed your call. I had a rough night. What's up?" Anthony was quiet, which sobered me in an unnerving way. "Anthony." His voice came as a whisper. "Dave's dead." I don't know how long I laid there in silence, trying to process what he had said. He called my name multiple times before bursting into tears and telling me that the funeral would be in the morning. I somehow managed to croak out an okay before hanging up. Suddenly frantic, I tapped on my contacts icon on my phone screen and I tapped the recent calls tab. My throat clenched shut and my stomach twisted painfully. I received a call at 1:27 a.m. I answered it. I put in my resignation Monday morning after the funeral and I left that same day. I didn't care about burning bridges or maintaining professionalism. I just needed to leave. I found a small design studio a month later and I isolated myself at my desk, producing excellent work while avoiding all social interactions and meaningful relationships. Anthony called me every day for 3 weeks, and then once or twice a week for a month, and then sporadically on holidays. I couldn't answer. I couldn't risk it. I was lonely, but I had my dad and my job. About a month ago, I was assigned to a new project and I did the best that I possibly could do, but the client hated my work. It was a stingy old man that didn't want to pay for half the things he labeled as requirements, so I politely offered a redo to the parts he disliked and I jointly come to an agreement on the cost. He refused to work with me through and demanded I get my boss. It was embarrassing to say the least. Even though my boss assured me that these things happened and my work was beautiful, I still felt horrible. My stress levels were high during that call. I was staring unblinkingly at my boss through her soundproofed office window while she consoled the angry customer. My angry customer. I was so upset by the whole thing that when the phone rang, I didn't even look to see who it was before answering. Hello? A crackle and then a voice.
Threat.
No! I hung up and I slammed the phone onto the table, snapping my head up and locking eyes into my boss's hunched form. For a long, painstaking second, I thought that it would be okay. Nothing happened, but I still didn't dare breathe as I watched her. Of course, I thought wrong. Her body jolted and screamed into the phone before dropping it and running out of the office. The secretary grabbed her by the shoulder and demanded to know what was wrong, but she couldn't speak through her hysterical cries. I don't think I breathed once during that entire interaction, not until she looked at me with frightened, watery eyes and unspoken blame. He shot himself. On the call, she whispered, almost soft enough to where I didn't hear her. But I did. And I finally let out the shaky breath I had been holding. I worked there for another month before I quit. It was only last week that I decided that I just couldn't handle the tension my presence caused the office. I offered my 2 weeks this time, but my boss gave me a tight smile and said it wasn't necessary. And so I left. I didn't tell my dad right away. I first sat alone for 4 days in my apartment, eating stale cereal and old applesauce and drinking every bottle of wine that I had left. I did a lot of drinking and a lot of thinking. After everything I lost, I decided this morning that I can't do this anymore. I need to leave this town. I have to go for my own sanity's sake. I don't know what that'll fix or if those calls will follow, but I needed to try. But when I finally worked up the courage to go to my dad's house to talk to him about my decision, he immediately refused to hear me out. He wouldn't even listen. I cried and begged him to just think for a second about everything I had been through, and that we had been through, and to maybe consider moving with me. But this was the first and only house that he and my mother bought together, and he wouldn't leave. This was his home, and by his account, this was my home too. He would have a hard time forgiving me, he said, if I left. I begged and cried for an hour until he shouted at me and told me to leave. In the end, I drove the short distance home in tears and I sat in the parking lot of my complex, crying like a baby. I couldn't stop crying, ugly crying, that I didn't even notice my phone vibrating in my purse in the passenger seat. I didn't hear the way that it made my house keys rattle. I didn't see the blinding light it emitted from the inside of my bag, and the way it made the inside of my car glow. I didn't notice any of it until I took a deep breath to calm myself, and I opened my eyes for the first time in minutes. I saw the light disappear as the call ended, and then I saw it return with full force as another call came through. A cold breeze washed over me and my bones turned to ice. My heart clenched. My breathing ceased. I stared at the end of the phone that was visible amidst the layers of pleather and I didn't blink. So many seconds passed. The light disappeared as the call ended and some of the tension left my body, leaving my muscles and joints throbbing. But both the light and the tension came back when yet another call came in. With trembling hands, I delicately pulled the phone out of my purse like I was removing a bomb, ready to detonate at any sudden movement or misplaced fingers. I avoided the screen like a plague, in fear of answering. I physically felt the color leave my face as the word unknown was revealed at the top of the screen. My stomach turned. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, but I thought I was going to be sick. Without even breathing, I set the phone down on the floor of the passenger side, screen facing up, and I tossed a jacket from the back seat over it. And then I ran out of the car, up to my apartment, and I locked myself in my bedroom. I thought that it was safe. I thought he was safe. But I heard the most impossible sound coming from my closet, and I wanted to vomit right then and there. I know what it is, but I can't go look. I won't. I have kept all of my family's old phones in a little plastic box at the corner of my closet. You see, one or two of them might still work with the red SIM card and a cell plan, but most are completely out of commission. But they're all ringing. Every single one of them. I think I might have even heard one of my old new male tones amongst the different ringtones and vibration patterns. I don't know how, but I know why. And I don't know what to do. It can't be her. She would never do this. Not to me or not to him. Please, what do I do? Please.